Hey guys, this is Chris from Half Chrome. Today I'm going to be talking about and reviewing the Falcon Pro laser engraver from Creality. Creality's really been expanding their product line recently beyond where they started, which was 3D printers. So does the system have it to be professional? Let's take a look today, a little bit closer look at the whole suite of options from Creality with a deep dive into the Falcon Pro. This particular system retails for about $430. The Pro comes with an air assist, which is, in my opinion, a very important feature. And it comes with a capable 10-watt laser and engraving speeds up to 10,000 millimeters per minute. For just another $70, you can get into the Falcon 2 series, which is a more up-to-date series of engravers. But you might be tempted to go with a more powerful laser, up to 40 watts in the system, but that's going to cost you. So with the lowest wattage laser of $500, all the way up to over $1,300 with the Falcon 2 series. So the question is the Falcon Pro, which is based on their original Falcon, is that going to be enough for your purposes? That's what we're going to take a look at today. Overall, my conclusion is that this is a professional grade product ready to do a diverse set of jobs. So believing in that I actually gave this engraver to Jack, the other half of Half Chrome, and he is going to be setting up an Etsy store using nothing but this engraver for the initial product line. So stay tuned and subscribe if you want to see the Falcon Pro in action doing professional work. You can find a link to the entire Falcon series of products from Creality in the description below. This video is for anybody considering a laser cutter from Creality or anybody who already owns a Falcon or Falcon Pro and wants some very useful tips in setting it up. I will go over those useful tips as well as all the pros and cons of the Falcon system. Now, I'm not just going to review the laser engraver. They were also nice enough to send me a laser bed, an enclosure, a rotary system, which is important for a lot of jobs, and some standoff legs to help support the extra height you need to get above that rotary system. So stay tuned. I will review all of these items and talk about the details coming right up. All right, so I'm going to start off with the laser engraver before I go into some of the accessories. Now in each section, I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and finally the pointers that I learned and the tips you'll need to help set up the system and get the most out of it. Overall, the engraver is a nice, complete system. It's a good laser and it comes with the included air assist, which is really important for blowing dust out of the way and smoke out of the way and getting a higher quality and cleaner cut. The big cutting area is a bonus. It is 400 by 415 millimeters, and I will say this system is nice and compact. I have an Algo Delta laser that looks more like the Falcon 2 from Creality, and at the time when I got it, there was no nice, inexpensive enclosure on the market available that would fit it, just due to the larger size of the frame. As a result, I had to build my own enclosure, which was quite a bit of effort. So this is a nice compact laser for getting the 400 by 415, small enough to fit in the enclosure, which I'll talk more about later. This is the easiest laser I have had to set up in Lightburn, which is kind of the industry-leading software for using laser engravers. It recognized the system immediately, recognized its size. So if you make sure you have the latest version of Lightburn, the setup was a real breeze. Another feature I like with the engraver is using the SD card. So I just put a single G-code file on the card, and what's nice about it is you pop that in to the card slot and you can press the button on the front of the machine and it will actually run as many times as you need to with very low laser power the path that you're going to need and the amount of space you need to kind of outline the project. Now this is a feature inside Lightburn, but Lightburn won't automatically turn on the laser at very low power, so you need to take some extra steps if you're doing this through your computer if you want to see that dot and see exactly where it's going to be engraving. So I do like that feature, but most of the time I'm still engraving right off the PC just because there's so much trial and error and setup time with engraving. I also like the variable adjustment, the little spacer they give you that kind of gives you that guidance on how to lower the laser when you're cutting through thicker wood. Most of the time you're going to be using the highest standoff, but there's enough clearance under the laser guard to let you lower it a little bit when you're cutting through thick wood. That makes a lot of sense and not something you can do on every laser system. All right, so that covers the high points. Let's talk about some of the downsides of this laser engraver. The instructions for setup were not great, particularly for the Y-axis belts. It was not clear how to route them, so check out in a minute here, I'll show you how to do that. Cable management on the Falcon Pro wasn't quite as clean as some other systems like the Falcon 2 or my Algo Delta laser cutter, but you can find a workaround. Again, I'll show you that in a minute as well. Air assist is a bit far away on this, so I think the dust removal might not be as complete as some of my other systems, but it's probably something you can work around with some adjustments to settings. I wish the laser head could lift another ½ inch or so, and I'll show you the workarounds for that in a following section where I'll be talking about the laser bed. If you're not using laser bed, not such an issue, but with the laser bed and a thicker piece you're trying to engrave on or cut through, you're going to want to be able to lift that laser a little bit more than they give you room for, and I'll show you how to get around that. It can be easy to run out of travel on these systems, meaning the system loses track of where it is. It runs out of space and it just tries to beat the motors against something they cannot do, and eventually it kind of shuts itself down and stops trying. But I wish they would include better limit switches, or there would be kind of a greater knowledge internal to the engraver of its sort of global position, and it wouldn't run into these hard stops. It's something you can do kind of by accident, and it happens several times, and I'm sure I'll get better at that, but it should just be harder to screw that up. It seems very violent. But it's not an issue isolated to just the Falcon. Finally, the speed of just 10,000 millimeters a minute, it's pretty dang fast, but some other systems like the Falcon 2 or the Algo Delta engraver that I have can do 20 or 25,000 millimeters a minute, which can make a difference for some jobs, although overall you tend to get better results not going that fast, so not really sure how important that is. But some jobs might be faster on other systems. Okay, some pointers. Now here's how you route the belts. They need to go under a wheel, over the gear, and then under another wheel before you kind of tuck them into the aluminum frame and screw them in with 2 set screws in the back of the frame. This is not well described in the directions, so just follow my lead here. You want the belts to be tight, but not too tight. Another thing you're going to want to snug up is the roller. So double check the gantry in all 3 locations. So that's on either side of the x-axis and then the x-axis roller itself. Make sure there's no play and that things roll. It's a very delicate setting to get that perfect balance between not too hard to slide around and no play. So dial that in just right and you get good results. Another thing is that cable routing. So don't let the cables that go to the x-axis motor hang behind the x-axis part of the frame. Bring them down in front and you won't have any issues. I had lots of problems having it hang behind, getting stuck underneath that motor, and then not being the x-axis getting stuck and just kind of hammering away and getting very angry and running out of travel. So tuck it in front, you won't have any issues. Finally, if you want to use a thick laser bed, then get the legs as well. So even though those legs are meant for the rotary, I recommend you get them if you want to do laser cutting and therefore use the laser bed. I'll show you why in the next section. All right, well, let's talk about the bed and the legs. And like I mentioned, I do recommend you get them together, and that's why I'm covering them both in this section. So about the bed, I do like that it has larger hells and a large standoff underneath it to help get smoke through those holes and out the sides. It comes with a heavy gauge aluminum base to go under the honeycomb frame itself, and I do think it's very nice, thick, heavy gauge, no issues there. The 3 leg exchangers that come with this system are enough to get you over the rotary if you do remove the bed, so no issues with the length of those extenders. Now to the cons of the bed and the legs. The bed is overall thick, so you might need to use the trick I'll show you in a minute to deal with some thicker work pieces that you put in there. I do miss having millimeter and centimeter markings on the edges of this laser bed. They are not included, and my 2 trees bed, while it does have some downsides, it does have those markings, which can come in handy. Another con about the legs this time is they are a pain to get on. For one thing, they can rub on the inside of the L-shaped legs that come on the laser. And second is the screws that they come with are just too long. You're screwing forever, just twist, twist, twist. You know, you're gonna get carpal tunnel just trying to get these things on and off. You can make that a bit better, but I'll talk more about that in the pointers. Now on to those pointers. Okay, first off, I recommend you get an engraving template to help line up and set up jobs. Now to do this, what you need to do is have a consistent reference frame. So what I do is I push the laser bed inside the front left corner, which is the home point of this laser engraver, of the L-shaped legs. So I push it up against there and square everything up, and that's a consistent reference. Now from there, you can get a piece of wood, or in my case, 1/4 inch MDF that had already been painted, and I put that on top of the laser bed and I square that up with the front left corner of the frame of the laser bed. Now with that, I can put on some light engraving and use that as a reference frame for engraving jobs. Now to that I added 25mm grid and 100mm circles because 100mm tends to be the size of circular coasters. Now with this, it's a very handy reference frame and something I can set up over and over again. As long as I have everything squared up, that's going to be in the same place for every job every time I turn on the laser. Now with that, I do have an issue. I've got, as I mentioned before, a rather thick laser bed plus the 1/4 inch piece of MDF plus, let's say, a coaster, which might be a 1/4 inch or thicker, and with that I run out of the laser travel. So here's my trick on how to deal with that. In order to lift things up a bit higher, I keep a single leg installed in the corner of the laser and I put those front 2 legs on top of the laser bed. They sit right on top of the rubber corners and lift the whole laser by about 1/2 inch compared to what it would be just sitting on a tabletop. With that, the L-shaped legs still sit below the one extender leg, allowing me to keep doing that cornering exercise I talked about before, so I can still line things up, and it lifts me higher. But it does create an issue in the back where I need something to support the legs in the back of the laser. For that, I cut a piece of wood about 1.5, actually 1.45 inches thick to hold the back legs up. Now I can still get things squared up and things are a bit higher now, and I can deal with all the jobs that I need to do. Another tip is that it might help you get away with some of these thicker jobs is just flip the laser bed upside down. It gets you a little bit less of a gap below, but might lower your workpiece enough that you can accommodate some thicker workpieces. And finally, a piece of advice, get shorter screws. I don't know why these set screws are so long that come with the extender legs, or at a minimum do what I did and just use Loctite to secure the screws to each leg. So you don't have to constantly kind of unscrew from both sides, which often happens. So that at least saves half your time. But these screws are too long, and they should be secured to one side or the other. So moving on from the bed to the rotary, some of the pros of this rotary is it seemed like a really nice motor. Very professional, smooth bearings. Didn't notice any backlash. So very happy with the quality there. It also seems better than a roller-based system just because it's much easier to deal with tapered mugs and other odd shapes. Some of the cons, I don't think it's quite tall enough to deal with every Stanley out there and some of these larger handles, so you can run into issues there. I'm sure with a little bit more hack we could modify it to make it taller, but as is, can't handle everything, so it'll limit how many sides of a Stanley or similar insulated mug you can engrave on. The grippers have a lot of play in them and are a bit slippery. Now for laser engraving, I don't think it's a big issue, but it would be nice if they kind of held the part a little bit better, maybe rubber, maybe a little bit texture on them, and if they felt a little bit cleaner and tighter. They've got quite a bit of play in them. Finally, this is my biggest issue. I hate plugging in and out the motor connector. So you have to disengage the connector where the X-axis motor plugs in and plug this in place. It feels like one of these times I'm going to break these wires. I wish they had a cleaner like a USB or something way to attach this. That'd be far more professional. They really need to do that. It's just too hairy to plug this thing in and out all the time. So, you know, set yourself up for one style of job and try to leave it there. That's my recommendation, or just be very careful plugging and unplugging. On to the pointers for the rotary. First up, set the first setting in the rotary setup process to 40 as the setting. I found that to be the right number for this particular rotary. That gets you the right amount of travel when you set for whatever diameter your workpiece is. You can set either diameter or circumference, and they both kind of adapt accordingly. So that's the first thing. You don't need to play around. Use 40. That's what works out here. Another tip is to use dark construction paper when you're setting up a job. I tape it to the workpiece, set the laser to as low a power as possible that will still engrave on the paper, and that lets you test out the pattern, make sure things don't need to be flipped, rotated, or what have you. Lets you set up the job, make sure it's dialed in before you risk burning a $10 or $5 or $50 mug in a way that you don't want to. Make sure the rotary is lined up really parallel to the X-axis as much as possible, otherwise you will get kind of a rotated or slanted engraving, so make sure you have that right. I kind of messed that up a little bit in this first test example. And some other things, I make sure I set up to start from center and set up my coordinate system as the center and start from current position when using the rotary, and you have to kind of remember to change all those settings back when you go to a normal XY engraving process not using the rotary. Last but not least, let's talk about the enclosure that Creality offers for this engraver. The pros are it is very easy to set up, it is very lightweight, which is different than the one I built out of wood. This thing weighs nothing but still gets the job done. It really has all the features you'd want. It has, feed through for cables from either or both sides. It has a place to attach a fan or vacuum hose on either side. And there's plenty of room inside to actually put the air assist pump inside and deal with any cable management associated with the engraver itself or the air assist pump. So really like the size, the weight, the simplicity of this enclosure. The con is really the fan. I mean, any fan that comes with an enclosure like this is generally just too wimpy to do much. I mean, where are you going to push the smoke? That's kind of the question. Are you going to push it into a filter? This fan's not going to push through any filter. Are you going to push it outside? A light breeze outside your house is going to be enough to push the smoke right back through it. This is a 1.8 watt fan, and we ended up, when we installed this at Jack's house, replacing it with a 32 watt or 20, that's a 20x power increase blower that's designed for 4-inch duct. And so that seems to be kind of the minimum of what you'd want. At my house, I'm using a shop vac, which is a 700x increase in power, or 1200 watts. And you're just going to need a bigger system no matter what you do. A 1.8 watt fan isn't going to cut it. You're going to need to figure something out. I mean, that's one of the big things with laser engraving, smelly things, particularly woods or plastics. You got to get those fumes out. And this fan that comes with it really isn't going to do much of anything. However, we are using the hose and adapting that to a larger pipe, a larger duct outside of that. So yeah, that's the main thing. Great enclosure, wimpy fan. For some pointers, if you are going to try to use this fan, make sure that the direction of flow is correct before you screw it on. I put mine on backwards at first. And in general, throw the grate on the inside. That's my recommendation. It kind of serves as a washer to keep the screws from pulling through the fabric enclosure and keeping the fan outside of the inside space and leaving as much space inside the enclosure as possible. So that's it, guys. Overall, this whole system works great together. The enclosure fits everything, the bed and the legs and the rotary. If you follow the tips I provided here, it's a great system. There are some downsides. If I had to pick one downside, it would probably have to be on the rotary, setting up, plugging in and out that cable. I just don't like it. It does not feel professional. It's just too easy to damage the cable doing that. I haven't done it yet, but I know it's going to happen one of these days. So before you buy a rotary system, keep that in mind and think about if there's a more advanced connection, like a USB style connection that your system can support. Now, if you like this video, this is now our third video about laser engravers. As I mentioned, Jackson, we do a second one on this just to show that this system with a 10-watt laser is capable of doing plenty of professional work. We will have that video coming out shortly, so make sure you subscribe and check out all the other content we have on Half Chrome. I'll see you guys next time.